"I'm sorry, daughter-in-law." That was the sentence my son demanded his mother say. Right there, in the middle of a lavish birthday party in Cape Cod, all because she accidentally saw a message light up on a locked phone screen. I spent 40 years tracking down fraud in the insurance business. I've seen people lose their homes, lose their careers, because they trusted the wrong person. But that night when I looked at my wife standing still among crystal glasses and warm golden lights, I felt something colder than anything I had known before. The most dangerous person isn't always out there somewhere. Sometimes, he's sitting at your own family dinner table. Before I tell you what happened after that apology was demanded, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I read those messages, every one of them, because sometimes a family story from Cape Cod can reach someone far, far away. And now, let me tell you what truly happened at that dinner party that night. That sentence kept echoing in my head as Preston stood up, raised his wine glass, and asked his mother to repeat it in front of nearly 30 guests. Not because she had done anything clearly wrong, just because a message had flashed across Madeline's locked phone when Mom bent down to pick up her purse from the hardwood floor. The beachfront house was picture perfect that day. Red maple leaves beyond the wide glass windows, soft waves rolling in the distance, a long table dressed in white, a 3-tier birthday cake sitting proudly in the center of the living room. Everything looked exactly like the photos Madeline always posted. Neat, warm, full of family. But real family doesn't run on images. Mom told me later, when the phone lit up, she only meant to press the side button and dim the screen so it wouldn't disturb the party. But the words stayed there long enough. Not a birthday wish. Not work. A question. When are we going to move forward with the plan? The old man is starting to get suspicious. Mom isn't nosy. 65 years of life taught her to respect other people's privacy. But the words plan and old man in the same sentence. They sent a chill through her. She put the phone down immediately. I believe my wife. I believe the slight tremble in her hands when she told me in the kitchen, where the music from the living room couldn't reach us. I had planned to speak to Preston privately after the party. But Madeline moved faster. She walked into the living room with red eyes, her voice trembling just enough to draw attention. She said she felt violated, that she never expected on her own birthday to face such disrespect. I wasn't watching her words. I was watching the timing. Right after Preston had cut the cake, right when every guest was focused. Preston's face changed immediately. He has always overprotected his wife. I once thought that meant he had grown into a man who stood by his family. That night, I realized it was blindness. He stood, asked for silence, then turned to his mother. Mom, you need to apologize to Madeline. Right now. No questions. No private conversation. Just a public verdict. Mom stood there, her hands folded together. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She simply said she hadn't meant to read the message. It just appeared. Madeline wiped her tears. I noticed. Her mascara hadn't smudged at all. I could have stood up then. I could have said family matters stay inside the family. But 40 years investigating fraud taught me something simple. When someone rushes to build a stage, it's because they need an audience. And when they need an audience, they're afraid of something. Preston repeated his demand, his voice harder this time. Guests began exchanging uneasy glances. The air grew thick. I placed my hand on Mom's shoulder. All right, I said calmly. We will make this apology. But not here. Preston frowned. Madeline held her breath. Tomorrow night, I continued, you both come to our house. We'll talk properly. I looked directly at Madeline when I said that. She held my gaze a second too long, and in that brief moment, I saw something others didn't. Not hurt, calculation. She nodded softly, then wrapped herself around Preston like someone who had just been saved from danger. The party went on. The music resumed. Guests pretended to relax. But you can't hide tension that thick. Mom sat beside me. Her hands were cold. I didn't say much. I just held her hand firmly enough so she knew she wasn't alone. When we left the house that night, the ocean wind felt stronger than before. I looked back at the brightly lit home behind us. In my career, I've investigated fraud cases that began with very small details. A misplaced invoice, a signature slightly off, a sentence too perfect. Here, I saw small details too. The message appearing at just the right moment. Tears that didn't smear. A public apology demanded, instead of a private talk. Everything too polished. In the car, Mom asked me something she rarely asks. Do you think I misunderstood? I looked at the dark road ahead. I thought about how carefully Madeline had built the image of a perfect wife for 3 years. I thought about how Preston had slowly shared less and less with us. I don't think you misunderstood, I said slowly. I think we just saw part of the picture. Mom fell quiet. She never wants to believe the worst in people. She always looks for the good first. I'm different. My old profession taught me this. When someone reacts too strongly to something small, there's usually something much bigger being hidden. That apology tomorrow night, it won't just be polite words. It will be where I begin asking questions. And I have a feeling the answers won't sit comfortably with anyone in that room. I've spent most of my life starting investigations from the smallest detail. But this time, that detail wasn't in a thick case file. It was in the worried look in my wife's eyes. The next morning, Mom set her teacup down on the kitchen table and said softly, I wish I hadn't seen anything at all. I understood that feeling. The truth doesn't always destroy things at once. Sometimes, it just cracks trust quietly, little by little. I asked her to repeat exactly what she saw. No adding, no guessing. She closed her eyes for a few seconds, arranging the memory. The message wasn't long. Just a few lines. The sender was saved as J. The words were clear. When are we pulling all the money before the old man changes his mind? Did you double-check the signature? Don't let Preston know. She said she didn't read further. The screen went dark quickly. But for me, that was already enough to make a public apology feel absurd. I didn't call Preston right away. I wanted to hear him first. That afternoon, I asked him to come by my home office. There had been distance between us for a few years now, but never tension like that day. He walked in, guarded. If you're going to talk about yesterday, I've heard enough, he said. I didn't answer immediately. I poured 2 glasses of water, placed one in front of him. Slow rhythm, no confrontation. I just want to understand, I said. Do you believe your mother meant to read that message? He sighed. Said Madeline had been devastated. Said she felt betrayed. Said our family had never truly accepted her. I listened, didn't interrupt. Experience taught me something simple. People reveal the most when they think they're defending something. And the messages, I asked gently. He avoided my eyes. Said it was just a joke between friends. Said Madeline once had someone harass her online. Maybe someone was trying to create confusion. What worried me wasn't what he said. It was how perfectly he repeated it, like a prepared memo. When he left, I didn't feel anger. I felt cold emptiness. My son wasn't just protecting his wife. He was standing inside a story someone else had written. That night, Mom told me something she had hesitated to share. Lately, Preston had seemed unusually tired. Said his head felt heavy, hard to focus. At first, we blamed work stress, but Mom noticed something. Every evening, Madeline prepared him a special herbal tea for better sleep. After drinking it, he grew quiet, distant, then went to bed early. Maybe he's just overworked, Mom said, almost convincing herself. I don't like coincidences. And I don't like when one person becomes dependent on a routine controlled entirely by someone else. I didn't jump to conclusions. I never did in my old profession. But I began writing everything down. The next morning I stopped by a pharmacy in the next town over. I didn't mention Madeline. I asked generally about herbs that might cause fatigue if used long term. The pharmacist said there are a few. If taken incorrectly, they can make someone sluggish, irritable, foggy. I thanked him and left. I had no proof Madeline had done anything wrong, but I could see a pattern forming. A mysterious message, a plan to withdraw money, a signature, Preston's unusual exhaustion, and a perfectly staged public apology. That night, I returned to my office. I opened my old laptop, accessed a few public databases, a habit from my working years. I typed in the name Madeline Carter as listed on Preston's marriage certificate. Not much came up, but one detail made me pause. Her credit history only appeared about 4 years ago. Before that, almost nothing. That isn't a crime, but it's rarely random. I searched a few variations of the name, not because I was certain, just instinct. One record in another state surfaced. A nearly identical name. Same birth date, different surname, a short marriage. Then, a bankruptcy filed by the ex-husband within 2 years. I sat there for a long time. I didn't want to believe my son had stepped into a cycle he didn't even recognize. But the data, it was beginning to form a straight line. I thought about Madeline's eyes at the birthday party. Not the eyes of someone hurt, the eyes of someone calculating the next move. Tomorrow night's apology. It won't be a simple act of humility. It will be where I ask the questions no one wants to hear. And this time, I won't rely on instinct alone. I'll be prepared. I told Mom I would prepare. Truth is, I started preparing the moment I saw the look in Madeline's eyes at that party. I'm no longer an insurance investigator. I retired almost 8 years ago. But some habits never leave you. You learn to look at the gaps in a story. Not what people say, but what they avoid saying. The afternoon before the apology, I called an old friend in Boston. He used to work financial investigations. We didn't talk long. I asked one simple question. If someone legally changes their name in another state, how do you trace the earlier public history? He didn't ask why. He just sent instructions for accessing federal court records and bankruptcy databases. I moved through it slowly, not because I couldn't do it faster, but because when you search for truth inside your own family, you have to be ready for what you might find. Madeline Carter led to very little before 4 years ago. But another variation, Elaine Carter opened a marriage record in Nevada. The ex-husband filed for bankruptcy 18 months after the wedding. No criminal charges, no dramatic scandal, just a rapid and unusual financial collapse. 2 years later, a similar record in Arizona, a slightly different name. Another short marriage, a small business that shut down abruptly. I sat still for a long time. I had no proof Madeline caused any of it, but the pattern was there. Enter, integrate, then exit when the assets begin to disappear. I remembered the message Mom had seen. Pull all the money before the old man changes his mind. I had never discussed the structure of our family investment funds with Madeline, but Preston had indirect access to certain trust accounts I set up years ago. I reopened my own financial records. A few recent transactions caught my eye. A pending electronic signature verification to transfer part of my antique watch collection into Preston's name. I had never signed it. The request was still waiting. Just one final confirmation step left. My heartbeat didn't speed up. It slowed. When things begin to align, I always grow calmer. That night I told Mom she would not be apologizing tomorrow. She only needed to be present. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I'm going to ask the right questions," I said. But before asking, I needed one more piece. I drove out to Cape Cod earlier than planned. I didn't go inside Preston's house. I observed from a distance, like I had done hundreds of times in the past. Around 7 that evening, a man walked out of their home. Not Preston. I recognized the gray SUV, the one Preston once proudly said was for family road trips. The man didn't hurry. He moved like someone familiar with the space. I didn't speculate. I wrote down the license plate. Back home, I checked the public vehicle registry. The owner, Jasper Cole. J. The same initial from the message. I wasn't surprised. Just clearer. I kept digging. Jasper had ties to an online asset brokerage company that had faced complaints for undervaluing private collections, then reselling them at higher prices. No formal convictions, but enough to keep me from looking away. By then I understood something. Tomorrow night wouldn't just be about family emotions. It would be where emotion and money intersect. I didn't intend to create a loud confrontation. I don't believe in public humiliation. I believe in placing the truth on the table, bright enough that no one can deny it. I contacted a lawyer I trust, confirmed that everything I gathered was public record and legally usable. I also gave a quiet heads up to a friend in the local police department, not to intervene, just to be aware, in case things moved beyond words. I didn't expect Madeline to cause a scene, but I would never underestimate her ability to redirect a narrative. That night I barely slept. Not because of the money. $2 million can be rebuilt. Trust cannot. I thought about Preston as a boy, running along the beaches of Cape Cod, asking why the tide rises and falls. I taught him that every movement follows a pattern. Nothing happens without leaving a trace. Now I wondered if I had missed any traces over the years. The next morning I arranged the documents neatly in a single folder. Old marriage records, bankruptcy histories, the unfinished asset transfer request, Jasper's vehicle registration, security camera stills from the neighborhood Jasper entering my son's house. I didn't need many words, just enough light. As evening settled, I stood by the living room window, looking out at the ocean. The waves rolled in steady, just like always. Our family once believed this house was the safest place in the world. Tonight, it would be the place where every illusion was tested. The apology would begin exactly as they expected, but it would not end the way they calculated. That evening, I opened the door as Preston and Madeline stepped in, as if they were arriving for an ordinary dinner. Preston glanced around the living room, maybe expecting tension in the air. But I had kept everything simple on purpose. Soft yellow lights, a teapot ready on the table, Mom sitting upright on the sofa, hands resting on her knees. She wasn't shaking, at least not on the outside. Madeline walked in last, a small, polite smile on her face, the kind no one could openly call fake. But I noticed something. She was studying the room the way I used to study a scene, looking for position, looking for leverage. "We should settle what happened the other day," Preston said before sitting down, his voice tight, trying to stay calm. I nodded. "Yes," I said. "Anne is ready to say what she needs to say." Mom glanced at me briefly. I gave her a small nod back. Not to apologize. To know I was here. "Madeline," she began slowly, "I didn't mean to invade your privacy. If that hurt you, I'm sorry." The room stayed quiet for a few seconds. Madeline tilted her head slightly, as if weighing how much acceptance to show. Preston squeezed her hand, waiting for closure. I stood up. "Now," I said evenly, "it's my turn to apologize." Preston frowned. Madeline paused. "I apologize for not looking more carefully into my daughter-in-law's past, before allowing my son to place his entire future in her hands." The air shifted, not suddenly, but clearly. I walked to the wooden table against the wall. A small projector was already set up. No dramatic music, no theatrics, just a click. On the screen appeared a marriage record from Nevada. Preston looked up. "Dad, what are you doing? I'm asking questions," I replied. The next page, a bankruptcy filing from the former husband. Then a similar record from Arizona. Madeline stayed quiet, no outburst. She simply crossed her arms. "Your name," I said calmly, "has changed at least twice in the past 10 years. Both previous marriages ended when the husband's finances collapsed. I'm not saying you caused it. I'm saying the pattern deserves attention." Preston shook his head. "You're reaching." "I hope I am," I said. Next slide. The pending transfer request of my antique watch collection and investment certificates. Preston's electronic signature. Awaiting final confirmation. "Did you know about this?" I asked. Preston stared at the screen. "I remember reviewing something. Madeline said it was asset restructuring for tax efficiency. And did you read it carefully?" Silence. Click. Security footage appeared. Jasper stepping out of their house the night before, clear enough to identify. For the first time, Madeline spoke. "You've been watching me. I monitor financial activity tied to my assets," I said. "Who is this man?" Preston turned to her. "Madeline." She exhaled slowly, as if shifting strategy. "He's a business partner," she said. "We've been exploring selling certain assets to invest in a new venture." "A venture Preston doesn't fully know about?" I asked. She met my eyes. "You never trusted me. You always assumed I came for the money." "I don't assume," I said. "I verify." I placed another printed document on the table. Message records between Madeline and Jasper. Legally obtained through a synchronized account Preston had once logged into on my home computer months ago. I didn't read every line aloud. I pointed. "Pull all the money before the old man changes his mind. The signature is almost done. Don't let Preston know." Preston leaned back in his chair, as if the ground had shifted beneath him. "That's..." He started, then stopped. Madeline didn't cry, didn't explode. She looked at me, then at Preston. "You really think your father cares about us?" she said softly. "He controls everything. I just wanted us to be independent." I didn't interrupt. I let Preston hear all of it. "And Jasper?" Preston asked quietly. She stayed silent for a few seconds. Then she said something that made the room shrink. "I never promised to stay forever. No tears, no drama, just cold clarity." Mom drew in a soft breath. I felt her hand tighten. Preston looked at his wife as if searching for something familiar. There was nothing there. "And the tea every night?" I asked calmly. "What's the primary ingredient?" She shrugged. "Herbs for relaxation. If he feels tired, that's because he works too much." I didn't argue. I already had an independent lab analysis showing elevated levels of a sedative herb in the remaining sample. Not immediately dangerous, but enough to dull alertness over time. I placed the report on the table. Madeline, I said, you have the right to remain silent if you choose. But everything tonight is being documented. For the first time, she hesitated. You think I'm afraid, she asked. I don't concern myself with your emotions, I replied. I concern myself with consequences. At that moment, the back door opened. An old friend from the local police department stepped inside. Calm, quiet. I'm not here to draw conclusions, he said evenly. I'm here to make sure everything proceeds transparently. Preston sat motionless. Madeline looked at me one last time, as if calculating another move. But this time, there was no audience to manipulate, no stage, only data, and silence. The apology was over, but the truth had just begun to unfold. The room fell still after my old friend stepped inside. No shouting, no chaos, just the slow weight of truth filling the space. Madeline looked around as if searching for another exit besides the door behind her. But this time, the story wasn't in her hands. It was in printed records, saved files, and in Preston's silence. Can we speak alone? Preston asked, his voice rough. The officer nodded and stepped back. I did the same. I wasn't there to turn that moment into a spectacle. Preston faced his wife. No anger now, no blind defense. Just a man watching the life he built begin to crack. Did you ever plan to stay? He asked. Madeline didn't answer right away. She looked at him, then at me. Whatever calculation she was making, she no longer controlled the rhythm. I just wanted a different life, she said at last. You were too dependent on your parents. Preston shook his head slightly. Dependent is not the same as trusting. It wasn't loud, but it told me something important. My son was finally seeing with his own eyes, not through someone else's script. The rest unfolded by procedure. The officer explained there would be further review of financial transactions and documentation. Madeline didn't resist. She gathered her purse, her face calm in a way that was almost unsettling. At the door she paused. You think you've won? She asked me. I met her gaze. I don't play to win, I said. I just don't let my family walk in the dark. The door closed. No drama, no slammed wood. Just a chapter ending. Preston sank into a chair, hands over his face. Mom stood and moved closer, but she didn't touch him. She let him choose the distance. A few minutes later he looked up. I didn't believe you, he said to her, his voice almost breaking but still steady. I asked you to apologize for something you didn't do. Mom sat beside him. I'm not angry, she said softly. I'm just sad you thought I could do that to you. I stood there watching them. In my old career, I saw people lose millions and rebuild. But when trust breaks, not everyone gets the chance to repair it. Preston turned to me. When did you know? When things stopped adding up, I answered. But I didn't want to believe it without proof. He nodded slowly. I didn't want to look at the proof. For a few minutes, no one spoke. Outside, the waves along Cape Cod rolled in like they always do. I've always liked that sound. It reminds me that no matter how tangled people become, nature keeps its order. The weeks that followed weren't easy. Meetings with lawyers, financial reviews. Fortunately, the asset transfer request had never reached its final confirmation. My watch collection and investment certificates remained untouched. Preston moved back in with us for a while, not because he needed a roof, because he needed quiet. We didn't speak of Madeline often. I didn't want to turn it into a bitter lesson repeated every day. I told him just one thing. Trust is a gift. When you give it, make sure the person receiving it understands its value. But don't close your heart to the world because you gave it once to the wrong person. A year later, Autumn returned to Cape Cod. Mom and I sat on the wooden bench, facing the ocean. Preston stood farther down on the sand on the phone with a partner about his new project. This one he built step by step. No family funds, no shortcuts, just his own effort. He had changed, not colder, clearer. Mom rested her head on my shoulder. Do you regret making everything public that night? She asked. I thought for a moment. If we had chosen silence, I said, maybe the money would still be gone. But worse, our son might have lost trust in himself. She nodded. Preston turned and waved at us like he used to when he was a boy. I didn't feel victory. I didn't feel triumph. I just saw my family still sitting together. The truth may hurt for a short time. But deception, if protected too long, destroys everything quietly. I spent most of my life investigating numbers and signatures. But the greatest lesson I learned wasn't written in any file. Never let blind emotion turn you away from the people who were there before you even knew what love was. The tide still rises and falls. And this time, so does my heart. Calm again. If this story meant something to you, take a moment to subscribe, like, and share. Not for me, but so stories about family trust and clear judgment can travel farther. We may not control everything that happens in our lives, but we can always choose honesty, choose to face the truth, choose to protect the ones who loved us from the beginning. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. I hope you always have the clarity to guard what matters most: your family.